I have a green light. Oh, there we go. We're good.
We are.
So, did you update the actual site?
No. Because I didn't know what to do. I'm like,
That part doesn't change, right? I think. Actually, that's a good point. What URL did we put in?
embed link.
Oh yeah. So how do you see that? Like, how do you find that? Info and settings?
Yeah, once you start, I think then you can get the link.
So if I go to the...
R.
Okay, so I'm watching myself now. I'm on the watch page. And then I can go to... Is there embed here somewhere? Like, how do I get the embed link? We'll fix all this in post. Yeah, this is not as simple as Hangouts.
No.
How do I get the embed link? Like, I thought it would be on the Creator Studio. Like, I'm looking at the channel, it says it's live. The internet can see you now. It's like, great. How do I get the embed link?
Very meta. The beginning of our show is us looking for the embed link.
It'll only be...
Okay, so no, I've got it, and I will pass it to you. Does Teams work?
Sure. Can you tell me where it is so I don't have to do this next time? Like,
so what I did was I Googled .NET Foundation YouTube.
Are you serious?
I'm a problem solver.
I'm looking at the video stream, so I'm assuming if I can see the stream. Everyone's saying they can't hear me. My levels are bad again. I can hear myself just fine, so I'm not sure why the levels... Yeah.
Okay, so I just... Can you... people on the chat, can you hear me?
So... Everyone says they can't hear me. Like, I can see the levels.
Hello.
I can. No, that's a different one. That's John. John's working fine. Oh, okay.
Yes, thank you, Ray.
That makes debugging hard when I'm looking at the wrong level meter. That's it, right?
See how much lower you are?
Yeah. So I'm quite a lot lower than him. And like, this is me an inch and away. Like, I'm not usually going to sit here this close, obviously. I'm going to usually be back here like this. So we need a bit more gain on that mic. You can hear John loud.
Yes, I dominate.
Quentin can hear me just fine. It just went up. I can hear myself louder now.
I boosted it.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's better. Yep. Like, it's peaking now in the yellow, so when I yelled.
Come down a little, because John's like... Slow it down a little.
Trying. Now it's not moving.
I'm just totally looking forward to when...
Because there's more than one mouse in front of me, and I used the wrong one.
A little bit more,
We need to order these so we can see them together. John, can you talk, mate? Do a test.
Hello, I'm talking.
Okay, so we seem to be the same.
John down a little.
So I could turn my level up now to my... John, can you... Oh, the problem is I can...
I'm still... I'll talk now.
That's just like what you're hearing.
Yeah, no, I can't hear... I'm hearing myself a lot louder than John. That's the problem.
Oh.
Okay. Now I am louder, Damien. Excellent. Now, but Philippe is saying he's hearing me at Signal. It was a 4. Okay. Everyone is disagreeing on how they're hearing either of us. So
They're messing. It's a conspiracy.
I'm just going to optimize for myself, everyone. And I'm sorry if you can't hear us properly, because I can hear him fine, and these people, some people can. Okay. So let's go back to the embed link. That's what we were trying to fix. So
I sent it to you in the Teams thing.
Sorry?
I sent it to you in Teams.
Oh.
Share.
Oh.
And then there's an embed.
Ah. Thank you very much, Galnez. So of course you have to click share to get the embed link.
Oh yeah.
So now we know to do that. Let's go over to here.
I'm just thankful we're getting a few run-throughs before we have the added stress of Hanselman on going, is this 4K? What's going on?
Yes. All right, let's delete that. Let's say, oh, come on. So that, save. All right, so the website now should show us, and it does. I should be able to click on that. It shows us. Perfect. I think we're good.
Wow.
I think we're good. And I should be able to make this go live, see myself. I can see you. I can't see anyone else, but that's fine. That's how it should be. I can show everyone you. There, say wave John. Everyone can see you now. Hi. Hi. And we can see both of us. There's me in the bottom corner, and there's John on the big screen. And there's back to me. Hey, look at me, Mr. Director. All right.
Wow.
Welcome, everybody. You're still a little quiet in my ears. We'll fix that afterwards. So we're done pretty well. This is a different setup to what we had last week. I apologize again for the teething problems. but we have a better setup than we have last week. It's now actually going through the broadcast machine, which last week it was going through my laptop. So we should be in 1080p this time, which is a big improvement. And we're still adjusting our audio levels. That's the hardest part of this entire setup, is we have in-room audio. We have my laptop, which is running the Skype call, the Teams call, going into the same mixer as the in-room audio. And then I have a feedback so I can hear all of it, but we have to kind of adjust all of that to be roughly the same. Someone's saying my voice is still too low. Others are saying it's fine. I can't hear John very well, but whatever. We'll figure it out. As long as people can roughly hear me and get the gist of what's going on, I think we're okay. John, do you have community links to share with folks?
I do.
Okay,
I have
you are now
community
presenting,
links.
so you can show us your desktop, John.
I will do show the desktop. I will
Lovely.
show screen number 1.
Do you have a screen on in your background, like bright right now?
Maybe. I've got a TV thing. I've got 3 monitors.
Okay.
How's that?
I can see your screen just fine.
Excellent. And I will move this little dude over there. Awesome. I like this. It's kind of meta here. I've got my first link. After I tweeted the show was going live, now we've got the little ad about the show. That's exciting.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay, so got a couple here on HTML email templates with Razor. So Scott has a very comprehensive meaty post going through all kinds of stuff. So the idea here is embedding something into a .NET standard class library that uses Razor to generate emails and send them off. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, so this is really cool. This is a great sending emails, sending nice formatted, HTML emails is difficult, and so this is really good. This goes through all of the stuff, base email layouts, and all the stuff as far as the Razor, creating your like a base layout and shared, and specific views and stuff. So really good stuff there. Now we've also got one. This is from Derek, and so Derek went through and also wrote something up. This is about sending Razor from a console application. So here he's going through and explaining how to do that. And he references Scott's post series as well. This may be useful for you if you've got a short attention span, because this is a much shorter post, and this is focused on sending from within a console application rather than a .NET standard library. So, cool stuff. Okay, so Halil posting on ASP.NET Core dependency injection best practices, tips, and tricks. I will confess to you that dependency injection still continues to be something similar to regex for me, where I need to go back and reread through it regularly because I forget something. It just doesn't always stick in my head. So this is a nice kind of explaining, bullet point wise, here's a little snippet code, here's some best practices, here's stuff to watch out for. So he talks through the different, constructor injection, what it's used for, property injection, good practices, when to use, etc. He talks about service locator and kind of summarizes, times where you wouldn't want to use it. Talks about service lifetime, etc. Then he also talks about resolving services in a method body and singleton and scoped. So just kind of a nice refresher, good to read through, and describing kind of all the kind of bullet point, best practices and stuff.
Just want to acknowledge I am seeing some artifacts on your screen sharing, which do seem like they're making its way into the stream.
Okay.
I'm not sure why it is. So it does seem to be coming through the Teams desktop sharing. Like I think it's okay, but I just, in case people are wondering, I see it too. So.
Okay. All right. Okay. So Adam exploring custom middleware. So he kind of walks through a basic, sort of hello world and building to a little bit more complex things with configuration and stuff. So here's some custom middleware that's going to just write some stuff out before and after. He talks about, kind of some standard steps. These are honestly, and he references it up earlier, that this is some based on like MVAs and stuff. And this is stuff that we've presented on before, but I kind of like how he just kind of walks through this in a nice kind of smooth manner. So here he talks about, writing before and after the context, componentizing, adding custom options, and then some steps for configuration. One is if you're going to configure it in just one place for use throughout the entire application, and the other is if you want to configure for use in multiple places. So you want to configure, you may want to use this middleware a few different places in your app and configure it differently each time. So he walks through that.
Cool.
So just kind of a nice walkthrough there. So this is a big one. Cesar de la Torre is posting about the update for the architecture guide. So this is modern web applications with ASP.NET Core and Azure. So this is the kind of free ebook. This is a big, big meaty thing, and so this is out. This is updated. So that is a significant effort, knowing how many pages that is for that to be updated.
Definitely.
So cool. Okay, so Brock has here's something he noticed, and I'm not sure if you got any comment on this. He says, watch out for the interaction between roles and schemes. That some things have changed with authorized filters for ASP.NET Core 2.1. So what he has seen is that the roles combine, but the schemes do not. So this was something he was not expecting, and that it looks to be changed from what was in ASP.NET Core 2.0.
So this is specifically in MVC. Just reading this because the option that controls this seems to be based on the MVC options, and it's about combining authorization filters. And this is also this is something that we changed behind the compatibility version flag. So you shouldn't see this change if you just upgrade your app and don't flip the compatibility version to 2.1. So for folks who haven't watched the show before where we talked about this, we introduced this API in MVC in 2.1 to allow us to make what are technically breaking behavior changes in minor releases for things that we felt were just wrong. The things that behave incorrectly that we get feedback about that typically would be a breaking change to change them. We now put those changes behind a configuration flag so that we can make the change, but then you have full control in your app to decide which behavior it is. So if you're creating a new app that targets 2.1 and sets the 2.1 compatibility flag, or you follow the migration doc and you follow it all the way to the end, you move a 2.0 app to 2.1 and you opt into the 2.1 behavior, then yes, this behavior will change. This is one of the 7 or 8 things that was changed in MVC.
Okay, good. And that is something he points out towards the end, and that's a good reminder. That code's there for a reason in File New Project, and probably better not to just delete it willy-nilly without understanding.
Yeah, I mean, basically, there aren't many cases where we want to make changes like this that don't align with the typical Semverse semantics, but given the scope of the framework and given the magnitude of major releases, it's not unusual for us to have an area where once we get more feedback, we realize that the behavior is just wrong. Either it was intended to be that way, but we didn't realize it would be bad, or there was a flaw in the design that we didn't get enough feedback on during previews that we need to be able to then control in the next minor. So we have this capability now. Great.
Okay. Okay, so this is cool. Sam's posting about the release of ASP.NET Core OData. So this is a walkthrough on creating OData from the server side, and then he's just using like Postman to kind of query it from the front end. But this is something where people, especially I've talked to people that have investments in OData that have been using OData or have tools, front end tools that are written against an OData backend, and so this is helpful for working with that, right?
Yeah.
So this is
So we saw that got released by the OData team.
Yep. So this walks through, creating it, installing the OData NuGet package, and then it's kind of a basic model, but then he walks through some other things like enabling querying, talking about the implications of that, and all that kind of stuff, and then kind of so here he's going through and kind of querying from the front end. So
cool
stuff. Okay, so Nemi here is writing about getting started with SignalR using ASP.NET Core and streaming the data to Angular. So there's a lot of code here as far as actually kind of binding to it from an Angular front end. This is all so decent amount of code walking through creating a stock. I believe this goes back a ways. You had a stock ticker app way back when. So this is cool to have the stock ticker. He's got some things, and I'm not sure if you had that before, but there's support for toggling market state, so you can have the market as open or closed, and once the market opens, then the costs go up and down randomly.
Yeah, no, that's been there since day one.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So the stock ticker sample got rewritten for the new Signaler core. So I'm assuming that this is basically an investigation of that code base. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think now, did yours work with Angular on the front end?
No, so this will be a rewrite using Angular instead of. I think the new one, Brennan on the Signaler team rewrote the new one. I thought he did use a new framework. I thought he may have. I don't know. I may be wrong.
Vue.
Back in the day, I used jQuery obviously, and
Yep.
I think he updated the new one to not use jQuery. I don't know if he used a framework or just did it all with DOM stuff. I'm not sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So this is a good thing to be aware of. Immo's posted about .NET Standard vNext, and this is public discussion of what goes in or .NET Standard vNext. So this is something where I've linked to this to make it easy to read, but this is out on the .NET Standard repo, so you can go.
Well, that's actually Immo's fork you're looking at right now.
Yeah, it is, and the reason I did that was so that I could actually read the scroll through and easily read the markdown, right? So,
but that's
why? Well, he's got it posted actually in a public pull request.
Oh, you can just hit the view file in the pull request, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough.
Sure. All right.
So it's in a PR right now. It's not actually proposed or merged. It's in a PR for discussion, I guess.
Yep. Exactly. Okay. So cool. All right. So Dickie's posting about .netify elements. So these are React components on the front end, and then he's using there's an MVVM system and binding using SignalR for updating. So some good looking components. They're all React based. There's also on the site, if you click through, there's some nice kind of samples, including some stuff like customer forums and admin dashboards, and those are all working with that too.
Oh, pretty.
So, yeah, it's nice. The quality of documentation is really nice here, and it's all kind of interactive stuff. So. Andrew Locke posted this. I thought this was really cool. This is this is kind of a neat kind of putting parts together. He wrote a .NET Core global tool that will update, the standard XML-based config to JSON-based config.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so he's actually going through and parsing, your kind of previous, whatever it is, global configs or whatever kind of config files, and then writing them out. He's got special handling in there for app settings and connection strings.
Is that the only things he handles? Like, I'm trying to think what else you would merge or like you would migrate.
Yeah, I don't know.
Those are the only two things I would have thought, right?
That does sound right, huh? Read those. Yeah, I guess that's it, huh?
Okay, yeah.
So, yep. So he's going through and reading kind of those things out of the config files and then writing it to hierarchical JSON.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it's a nice kind of to see. It looks like both a useful tool and also a kind of cool application of
the global tool stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool. Scott Allen writing up. I love these when he goes through and just like 7 tips and they're just boom, 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 boom. But these are great little tips for troubleshooting ASP.NET Core startup errors. So things like making sure you're seeing the errors, how to view the stack trace and that kind of stuff. Turning on logging for IIS and then of course also the .NET CLI is a great way to watch those errors.
Yeah,
and
that's
stuff.
really good. We actually have a doc about this today as well. That's a little more targeted to diagnosing startup errors when running on things like Azure App Service. And it goes through a very similar set of steps, but involves also like, you might go to the Kudu console and try and run the app from the console in order to get more information. It's also an area that we're continuing to try and do a bunch of work in. So in 2.2 with the ANCM in proc work, where we're going to host the ASP.NET Core app in process in IIS. Our hope is that, we have that working already, that we can get more error information from the runtime, and we can also scrape the general output of the application. And so what we do is when ANCM tries to start up the application, it buffers the console output during the startup phase. And if the process dies or the runtime fails to be started, we'll capture all that output and then we'll write it to the Windows event log. along with the normal sort of ANCM couldn't start up your app. So hopefully, at least if you can see the Windows event log, you'll get a lot more detail about why it was the application wouldn't start, and then you don't have to go through the whole configure console redirect, output redirection, or run it using .NET .exe or whatever. You can just go to the event log if it failed to start in IIS, and it'll tell you, oh, your app didn't start because the shared framework you were targeting wasn't installed or whatever it is. So we've been continually trying to refine that, and I think there's a meetup this week actually between the ASP.NET Core team and the Azure App Service team to try and drill down on that again and see if we can get to an even higher level. Like ultimately what we'd love to be able to do is that when you publish your app, as soon as it's running on Azure App Service, if it fails to start for whatever reason, like the portal would have a banner on your site that literally says, your app has failed to start, click here to find out why. Like that's kind of the holy grail. That's what we want to get to. But as folks can probably imagine, getting to that type of very real-time experience with as little delay as possible is a little more complicated than it sounds. And so we're working with that team to try and figure out how short can we make that feedback loop so that when I publish my app, like if you right mouse click publish from VS today, it'll actually tell you, right, in the output, it says, oh, your app is now publishing, it's published successfully, and then it'll give you a URL of the site of where it published to. It'd be great if it could tell you whether the app actually worked, right? Like if there was some type of way to smoke test it, or it could detect if there was a startup error and tell you immediately. That would like get the feedback loop down really, really low. But then if you're doing a CI/CD deployment, whether it's via Kudu or VSTS or something else, you'd obviously you need that error somewhere else. So you need to be able to very quickly diagnose, oh, my app's not starting, why is it? It'd be great if you could just go to the portal and just see that like a banner. That's kind of what I'd like to see. So anyway, they're working on that, but it's good to see that folks have sort of collated this information together in real time.
Does that integrate also what you're just talking about, that experience? Would that integrate with like health checks as well?
Yeah, so it could. I mean, well, startup errors probably not, because health checks runs in your app. So if your app doesn't start, health checks aren't going to do much for you.
It's a trick question. I almost got you.
Yeah, so health checks is more about, obviously, which is something that's being worked on in 2.2. It's about detecting degradation of health after the app is running, whether it's because an external dependency has stopped responding, or your CPU use has gotten too high, or your memory paging, or whatever, or your exception rate's gone very high. You have various metrics in your app that you can use to determine, is my app like okay to be in this cluster, or to be load balanced to, whatever it might be, depending on your deployment. From as simple as yes, I'm okay, or I'm not okay, to varying grades of like, yeah, I'm fine, or I'm okay, but I'm running in a degraded state. So, you can send me requests, but I'm having a couple of issues right now. So,
Cool. All right. So this one's interesting. This is Mike, and he's writing about Razor Pages, TypeScript, and Knockout. So it's an interesting post. He's walking through if you're using Knockout.
Why is that GIF there? Who is he throwing shame at?
About using jQuery.
Oh,
he said he went
to
to a presentation
and
he went to a presentation and someone said, who still uses jQuery, and no one put their hand up. And he's like, I secretly still use jQuery. Sometimes.
Well, if you go to those websites to track what the top 100,000 sites use, we can tell most people are still using jQuery.
And I mean, it's still, I don't know if Bootstrap 4 uses jQuery much, but I mean, Bootstrap 3 definitely did.
Bootstrap 3 definitely does.
Yeah.
We just checked in the Bootstrap 4 stuff actually for 2.2. I'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, there should be more respect, I think, for jQuery, where a lot of the stuff was spackling over stuff that didn't work well or work the same between browsers, but man, it sure got us through a lot of
Well, it also introduced a bunch of really interesting sort of coding paradigms that we hadn't seen in like the whole query selector syntax, or Sizzle as it was called in jQuery, turned into a real API. Like that literally that idea came from jQuery, as far as I know, where you could just use a CSS selector to get a collection of elements. And then they added the whole sort of chained, fluent programming style of working on a collection of elements, and then chaining calls with this closures and setting the active this scope to the element being operated on, and all that type of stuff. That was like popularized at least with jQuery, right? And so and then having just a nice Swiss Army knife of common utils for like Ajax and event handling and custom events and data when you put data dash attributes on your elements, all that type of stuff. That really, jQuery really popularized that type of stuff. So like it does what it's designed to do really, really well.
I think if you're building a huge single page app, then it's not
No, basically, as soon as you need templating is where,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why Knockout came about, right? Because Knockout introduced the idea of bindable two-way binding templates, but was generally used in conjunction with something like jQuery, or maybe you would use Knockout and underscore, and then that kind of grew
Right.
up into the idea of full-fledged SPA frameworks. And so, I mean, but there are many sites that aren't written as SPAs, obviously, and they don't want to use Angular because it's not the right fit for them. They're doing server-side rendering, but they would still like a library that gives them these types of utilities. And personally, I think jQuery is perfectly fine for that if you need to do those type of things.
It wasn't that long ago. I don't know if they've changed it since then, but I was on the Duolingo website, and I was like, "What tech are they using here?" And it was all jQuery, and it was pretty clean. I was like, "What?" So yeah, good stuff. So Mike goes through writing this up, talks about using TypeScript, Knockout, and ASP.NET, and kind of hooking and Razor Pages, and kind of hooking it all together. So great post. Yep. Okay, so Mohammed wrote through, this is a quick but good thing to know about. This is query helpers in ASP.NET Core. So here he needed to deal with parsing query strings and writing query strings, and this kind of takes out all the concatenation, and is it the first thing, use a question mark, otherwise use an ampersand and escape it correctly, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a good thing to know about. This is just basically a link to a survey, but this is about the IL linker. And when they tweeted about this, they included ASP.NET Core, and so I thought it's worth letting everyone know about this. So this is the getting feedback on building the IL linker that will be used everywhere, including ASP.NET Core stuff. Okay, getting towards the end here, we've got Hisham, and here he talked about localization testing using an in-memory string localizer. And when I first looked at this, I actually read quickly, and I was like, in-memory string localizer, let me Google this, and I couldn't find any hits, and then I realized, oh, that's what you're creating here. So, but what's the idea here, and he lists out some use cases. Some are, if you're not using ResX, you don't want to, you're not in Visual Studio. Also things like for unit testing. And then also he talks about some cases, which I'm sure he hits regularly, which is demos or experimental localization APIs. But so, I could definitely see this for unit testing where you want to create a bunch of resources, maybe, on the fly kind of stuff. Right. So here he's writing up using an in-memory string localizer, how to create it, how to register it, and so there you go. The last thing I'm linking to here is something you tweeted about, and I didn't know if you wanted to.
You're stealing my thunder. That was the first thing I was going to talk about.
Well, or I'm transitioning to yours. It's a segue.
Perfect. Let's see if I can get this transition. So I'm now picture in picture, and then I'm going to flip over to mine, and then I'm going to do. What am I going to do? Oh, I know. Then I'll do this, and then I'll do that. And now it's transition, but now it's on my screen instead of your screen. Look at that. So now I can drive it. They can't see you, but that's okay. And they can't see me either, but that's okay. Yeah, so this was something I tweeted about this week. Some folks on the .NET team have been working on updating this landing page. So we call this the marketing site, right? Like we know there are customers who basically just consume all the bits through GitHub, and that's fine. But for the vast majority of people, they get .NET Core or .NET through Visual Studio updates, or they go and download it themselves from the marketing site from dot.net. And so just to prove that, I can go up to the address bar. I can say dot.net, hit enter, and it redirects to this site here. So we've been working to try and simplify this site for acquiring sort of the latest pieces and the common pieces. The reality is .NET Core is a fairly complicated framework. It's made up of lots of different things. It's not just one thing, obviously. Like there's the .NET Core runtime, there's the ASP.NET Core shared framework, there's .NET EXE, there's the NuGet fallback folder. It includes the SDK or the CLI, which has Roslyn and MS Build, and then there are builds for 32-bit and 64-bit and different platforms. And so all of those constituent modules you can actually download separately in most cases, but that's generally not what you're going to want to do. You generally just want to get, I'm a developer, give me the SDK, or I'm running a server, I need the runtime, right? So I need stuff to build apps, I need stuff to run apps. That's kind of the typical thing that you see with any software development platform. And so we've got a new download page. I just clicked on the download button that revolves around those two things. Now, this is the home page to download both .NET Core and .NET Framework. It's basically all of .NET. If you're only interested in .NET Core, you can focus on the left-hand side here. And obviously for Linux and Mac, it'll only show .NET Core. Now, this page will default to whatever platform you're currently on. So I'm running on a Windows machine, so when I click download, it chose Windows, but you can obviously change that to download alternate platform versions as well. But just know that when you hit this, it'll look like whatever is right for your platform. So for Windows, we have .NET Framework as well, but as I said, we'll concentrate on .NET Core. We really want to make sure that we direct you very quickly to the most important parts. So when it comes to branding of .NET Core, really the major and the minor versions are the ones that we want folks to focus on most of the time. Those are the versions that you target. So you say, I am building an app for ASP.NET Core or .NET Core 2.0 or 2.1. That's what gives you various APIs and features. The servicing or the patch levels are typically delivered in the case of .NET Core Runtime or the ASP.NET Core Shared Framework. They're delivered by installing something machine-wide, right? Generally speaking, whether it be the SDK and then deploying your app again if it's self-contained, or deploying a new hosting pack or a new ASP.NET Core / .NET Core Runtime, and then all the apps on the machine will get rolled forward onto that servicing release. So we don't show that patch version up here, but you can see it is shown just down here. So it's not like it's completely obscured. And we have had a little bit of feedback since this page went live that some folks would like to see this version higher up, but we're going to continue monitoring this. We'll look at the analytics on the site, and we'll see how folks are going. But as I said, we've got this new sort of emphasis now on if you're building an app, and there's a little overhead, little thing here that tells you, a little tooltip that says what that means. You just download the SDK, and if you're running an app, and again, little tooltip tells you what that means, then you download the runtime. Now, this button here and this link down here that talks about the runtime, this one here, sorry, they're focused on giving you the runtime that will run the most kinds of apps. So that includes the ASP.NET Core Shared Framework. Okay, so there's a .NET Core framework at the bottom. So .NET Core Net Core App is the TFM, which results in Microsoft netcore.app as a shared framework that you run on. And then there's a Microsoft ASP.NET Core shared frameworks that run on top of that. Okay, and so typically most servers you want both of those, right? Because most people are running ASP.NET Core apps in production or on servers, and there are fewer cases where you have a machine that just has .NET Core runtime on it and not the shared framework. I mean, they do exist, but we don't have those links on the front page anymore because we've got a lot of folks who are confused about, oh, why is there a link for .NET Core and ASP.NET Core? Or they wouldn't see the ASP.NET Core link, they just download the .NET Core runtime update and then wonder why their apps wouldn't run. So we've really optimized this site for like the 90 to 95% use case, okay? If you want to see all the downloads, then you can just click the all 2.1 downloads link right here, and that will take you to a page that has everything. Before I do that, the other thing to call out is we've also made the release notes a little more prominent. So we had feedback during the various patch release that people couldn't find the release notes, and so we've made sure that those release notes, here they are here, the release notes are now sort of front and center on this main download page. Now for the other platforms, so like for Mac, it's a developer platform only, so that download page is much simpler. There's no .NET Framework, obviously, because it's not Windows. There's no runtime installs because you should just be downloading the SDK. That's what you do on a Mac because it's only really for development, so there's just one button, just download the SDK. For Linux, it's actually a little more complicated because you remove .NET Framework, obviously, but there are different ways to install depending on your Linux distribution. So a lot of folks use package managers for Linux, like apt-get, or Yum, or whatever it might be, depending on your distro. So we have instructions there on how to use package managers to get the SDK. Again, building apps, get the SDK, running apps, get the runtime, versus using zips, like downloading archives, which is quite common as well in the Linux space. There isn't the traditional installer approach in the Linux space. You generally use a package manager or you use an archive. So every page looks a little bit different because every platform is a little bit different. But if I click through to the sort of full download list for this release, now again, it doesn't have the patch. It's just like, give me all downloads for the 2.1 stream, right? Then we get this new page, which is reverse chronological. And we've worked really hard on this page to try and make it information dense, but still very clean and clear as to the timeline to all the releases that have been available, with the focus on the last release at the top, right? Because that's generally what people are going to want, is they want to get the latest release. Okay, so this is .NET Core 2.1. Again, left-hand column is if you're building apps, SDKs. Right-hand column is if you're running apps. Now, this is where it gets a little more complicated, right? If you're running an app, there are edge cases where you might just want a very specific runtime update, and that's why all these links are here, which is why we generally tell folks to focus on what's on the front page, but this is how you see everything. We've got links for each bitness, obviously, and then all the OSs are merged together into this one list here, broken out into these bullet points. We've also introduced these new tags, and so you can see that 2.1.2 is the current release. Current meaning the latest in the current train. So we have these two trains, right, for .NET Core. We have LTS and current. So 2.1.2 is the latest of the current train, which means that if you're on the latest bits and you want to be supported, you have to be running the release that has this purple tag on it, right? That is the supported release currently under the current train. And then there's also a green patch, a green tag here that says this includes a security patch. So anytime we do a release that includes fixes for any CVEs, which we sometimes refer to as MSRCs, or Microsoft Security Response Center, I believe that refers to, then you'll have this patch as well. So you can scroll down and you can see which ones of these releases contain security fixes. Now, because 2.1 hasn't had many releases yet, there aren't many here. But if we go find the 2.0 equivalent version of this page, because some folks are still on 2.0 because it's still currently supported, then you'll see more of these tags, and you'll see LTS tags on the 1.0 versions of this page. So if I go find the 1.0 versions, I should just be able to URL hack, right? So I should just be able to go to, let's go to 2.0 instead of 2.1. Oh, I get a 404, Rowan. I'm gonna blame other people instead of me taking responsibility for doing something wrong. It's because I typed it in wrong. See, this is what happens when I'm looking at a monitor that's 6 feet away from me. Ready, let's try again. 2.0, there we go. There we go. So now I'm on the 2.0 train. You can see quite a lot more, going on here, because this has been a longer set of releases. Like 2.0 came out, last August, I think it was. So it's been 11 months, right? So we've had quite a lot of servicing releases. So we can just scroll all the way back in time to the previews even. So you've got this one page now that shows you every public release that we did in this train, which I think is super helpful. So you can see that the preview releases are marked as preview, and if you hover over those, it tells you that previews are generally not supported. You use them, we release them to get feedback, etc., etc. And then you'll see that we've got 2.03 was a security release. 2.03 is listed twice. Oh, because 2.03, so this is another interesting detail. Let me turn off my PnP so you can see more of this. So the SDK sometimes ships separately or ahead of a runtime release, okay? So the SDK also ships in Visual Studio. So right now, if you're using Visual Studio 15.7, it includes a version of .NET Core. It includes .NET Core 2.0, whatever the latest patch version is. And 15.8 will include 2.1, whatever their latest patch version is. We're going to move it forward to 2.1. And so sometimes we have to do a new SDK release because there was a VS release and something like Roslyn was updated, or NuGet was updated, or MS Build was updated. And those components also ship in VS, so they have to match from a tooling point of view. So sometimes, even though the framework didn't have to update or the runtime didn't have to update, we did have to update the SDK. And so you can see here, this was the release when we did 2.03. And then very shortly afterwards, it was still .NET Core 2.03. We didn't have a new runtime, but you can see the SDK version updated, okay? And so that it was because of VS. And there's some information that we're looking at adding to this page to make this even clearer, so that you can imagine in the future, we're actually going to have more detail on the left here that says, why did this release happen? What version of VS is it in? And so it would be very clear that this release happened because there was a VS version that this SDK shipped in. And it would tell you what version it is. So you can go, oh, if I have VS 15.4 or whatever it might be, that was the version that SDK version 2.1.2 was in, for example, okay? So this kind of is the decoder ring, right? There's a lot of ways, different bits that get shipped, and sometimes they ship inside other things, and it can be useful to know when did that happen and what did it align with, and that's what this page layout is designed to solve. So I can scroll through here and I can see all the releases, 2.05, there's the SDK 2.14. Some folks may remember the SDK went through this weird sort of versioning schism where they went from 2.0 to 2.1, and then from 2.12 to 2.14, and then to 2.1.100, as we introduced a new versioning scheme to try and retcon this versioning weirdness that confused folks. And so the rest of the 2.0 train is on a 2.1 SDK version, but it's less than 21300, and 21300 is the version where it aligned again with the runtime with 2.1. And so we can go all the way back up to the top. So we can see that the last servicing release we did of 2.0, which was 2.09, which is the one that just came out, it was also a security release because it can contain the same fixes that we shipped in 2.1. And that SDK version was 2.1.102. If I go back to the 2.1 download page, see if I can get it right this time, you'll see that the SDK versions all start with 300. And then when 2.2 comes out, which I might give you a sneak preview of in a minute in terms of those pages, that SDK version will align. It'll be 2.2.100, the first version. So this was announced a while ago. I think we've talked about it before, but now we're really starting to see it all line up as of when 2.2 comes out. But at least now we can historically see what all the release information was for every release and what it aligned with. So I'm hoping, there's a lot of information here, I understand that, and there are versions that are run on their own schemes because they have to, because they ship in different things, but at least now there's a table that makes it, I think, a lot clearer than it has been as to what version shipped with what and what it aligns with. So I hope this makes folks it makes it a little clearer. Hasham's asking the question, where's 2.04? It jumped from 2.03 to 2.05. Yeah, that happened a couple of times in the past. Versions were skipped or unified for reasons. I'm not going to say they were good reasons. We hope not to do that again. We did one in 2.08 where ASP.NET revved, but .NET Core didn't, and that just really confused everybody. So from now on, these things all ship together. They should always have versions that align according to some rules that don't change, and so we shouldn't see those gaps, hopefully, moving on. Like, reality is we've learned a lot from trying to build a product like this with lots of different layers that are sometimes versioned independently in different products, and this is where we've come to right now. Yeah, someone pointed out Angular went from version 2 to version 4 because they had a very similar problem where they had different parts of the stack that were shipping in different cadences, thus they versioned together differently, and that just caused confusion. So they moved back to sort of doing aligned versioning. So yeah, anyway.
Well, it's a good interview question. You could say, have you used, .NET Core 2.04, and then
they go, yeah, exactly, that one didn't exist. Yeah. Or you can say, do you use .NET Core 2.1? They go, well, which 2.1? Do you mean 2.1.200 SDK, or do you mean 2.1? Yeah. So the reality is, as I said, the first page is designed around making this, you generally don't have to worry about that part day to day. You generally just have to know, I'm targeting .NET Core 2.0 or 2.1 or 1.1 or 2.2. That's what gives you features. The patch version is obviously important in order to make sure that you're running on the latest servicing releases, you have the latest fixes, and the easiest way to do that is, once it's in Visual Studio, install your Visual Studio updates. If you are running ahead of where Visual Studio is because we haven't merged it in yet, like where we are right now, then you just install the SDK. That's the developer bit. And you just come here and you download the latest SDK and you install it. And then for your servers, you download the appropriate runtime pack, or installer. Whether it's on Linux, you get it from your package manager, and if it's on Windows, you click this button and it gives you the Windows Server .NET hosting bundle, I think it's called. And that covers like 9 out of 10 cases. And then for the edge cases, obviously you need to know a little bit more about what exactly you've done to compose your application, and then what it is you need to run on the target. If you're doing self-contained deployment, which I mentioned briefly, that's all done at publish time, so that's all driven from the SDK. Okay, and then as of 2.1, what happens is the SDK, when you publish a 2.1 application self-contained, it will find the latest patched version that the SDK knew about, and then it will publish with that version, so to ensure that you get the latest fixes. You can control all this behavior, by the way. If you really care about it and you want to state your versions explicitly, and you don't want to get any of this kind of safe by default roll forward behavior, then you can turn it off. But we default to that to ensure that people are generally secure by default when they perform their normal actions. Yeah, so that's all that. I alluded to there being 2.2 stuff. There's a couple of things. We're building the 2.1.3 servicing release right now. So as I said, the latest servicing release was 2.1.2 down here. You can see it's the latest patch version of 2.1. That's going to come out in August sometime. By this time next week, or maybe a little bit later, I hope to have links to share with folks who want to try that out early, a little bit like we did the last time round. So you'll be able to go to a GitHub page. In fact, if I go and spelunk around right now, if I go to .NET, I think I have to go to core. If I go down here.
I'm really curious as you're looking that up. Did we have how many people actually How many people tested out those early releases?
Some.
Okay.
We don't have great stats. Like, I mean, because the
Okay.
links were just posted on a GitHub page, right?
Right,
And I
right.
tweeted it. But I know some folks tried because they replied. But, you know, we know this time around it'll be more like using Nightlies. In fact, it'll basically be using Nightlies. And we're just going to clean up the acquisition experience for getting them and make sure it's clean. So, yeah, I mean, we know some folks use Nightlies, right? And we want to make it easier for folks to use Nightlies and be able to do it cleanly and uninstall cleanly, or make sure they land on the right version when the real one comes out. And so that's what we're working over in the next weeks before we share these links. But in the meantime, this is kind of what it looks like right now. You can see here, there's a link under .NET Core releases. It says download the latest SDK, that's 2.1. But there's daily links. So you can see daily preview builds and daily servicing builds. So preview builds means the next feature release. So this will be 2.2 in this case. They aren't very useful right now. I don't think we actually have. I think we were like literally this morning they were saying we were hoping to have our first candidate build for that today. And our current plan is to get our first sort of easy to use preview out in early August, which is like 3 weeks away. Servicing. If I click on servicing builds, you can see here that there are various trains, right? So this page isn't up to date. It's being updated right now. 2.13xx, that's the SDK release, right? As we just discussed on that page that had all the matrix of information. The next servicing release will actually take place after the next VS update. And so it's going to be 2.14xx, because that last version of the SDK versions whenever anything changes, right? Whether it's a runtime update because of a patch or a feature update because a new release of VS came out, this is when this number changes. So because it's a feature release, because 15.8 is coming out soon, this will go to 2.14, and I'm assuming 2.1400 will be the one in 15.8, and that will contain 2.12 of the runtime, I believe, and then 2.1401 will be the first servicing release, and it will contain 2.13 of the runtime. Okay, and again, all that information would be available on that release page that I showed you before. So within the next day or so, we hope there will be another bullet here, which is take me to the daily builds for the 2.14xx releases, and then you'd be able to, like I said, next week, I'll be able to point you here, and you'll be able to go and try a daily build of the next servicing release. There's a lot of fixes in 2.13, and so we'd love to get folks to try it out early. In a controlled fashion, so they can give us some feedback if there's anything that they consider blocking. We think we're done, but we need to get some verification before we release it next month, and so that's what we're working towards right now. Yeah, so for 2.2, as I said, we're targeting right now that the 2.2 preview builds, that what we're going to do for 2.2 is we'll do 3 previews. I think I said this previously. I didn't give any dates though. We're hoping about August 7th for preview 1 is kind of what we're penciled in right now. And from the ASP.NET side, we actually hope to land the beginning of a few of the things we're working on. So we hope there'll be a health checks implementation that people can play with in the first preview. There'll be changes to the API, all the improvements to the API conventions experience, the API controller stuff, with the analyzers to help you do that correctly. So you'll be able to then plug in Swashbuckle or NSWAG or something else that reads the API metadata to produce you a Swagger document, and they'll just be much richer Swagger or Open API documents without you having to write any more code, which is wonderful. What else do we have? We have a Signaler Java client that is almost functional, so that we should be able to see something there in preview 1 that you could try out. I'm probably forgetting something. We've started the investigation on the authorization server work. I'm not sure there'll be much to look at in the preview 1 time frame. What else is there? What else was in our 2.1 announcement? I could just go and look, couldn't I? Let's have a look. If I go to announcements, did I spell that right? Announcements. 2.2 announcement is here. Okay, rough schedule. I actually have the schedule there. Look at that in the months anyway. APIs and services, we talked about that. Open API generation, talked about that. Oh, Dispatcher, which is the new global routing system. So I believe that will be in preview 1 as well. We're just arguing over what we should call it right now because a lot of folks don't like the Dispatcher name. So that should be available in preview 1. The only thing that's open is whether you'll be able to set up MVC to use it in preview 1. I'm not sure whether that will be ready for preview 1 or not. The REPL. I think there'll be a preview of the REPL in preview 1, so you can this new global tool experience that lets you sort of code against an active API and get like nice commands in the command line, like ls my API and send test queries and all that type of stuff from the command line, which is pretty cool. Not sure we're going to have much in the API client generation. We're trying to introduce this new idea of a service reference in MS Build, so you'll actually see it in your project file, like your project reference, package reference, framework reference, you'd have service reference, and that's what you point at a Swagger doc, or you point at another project that produces a Swagger doc. And then you would plug in a code generation tool that knows how to look at that information and produce you a client. So that code generation tool could be NSwag, it could be Autorest from Microsoft, or you could write your own one. And so we're looking at that, and we'll see how much of that we land in Preview 1, or if anything, otherwise there'll be something in Preview 2. I spoke about authorization server. Oh, there should be some HTTP2 stuff landing, the beginnings of HTTP2 anyway. It's nowhere near complete yet, but the beginning of that should be available in Preview 1. The improc ANCM support will be in Preview 1, but you'll need to wait for the first preview of the following VS update before you get the VS experience, because it requires changes to the IIS Express hosting model with the project model and and that was not going to make it into 15.8. It'll be in the preview of the next release, but that won't be too far after that, just a couple of weeks. And that's it. That covers everything I think we were talking about, because Signal is there. So yeah, so that's all coming.
Hisham asked if you can talk about the new route pattern.
I don't know what that's referring to. Sorry, what's that? The new route pattern.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember.
New route pattern that has been introduced. I don't know what that is. Sorry. No,
right.
if that's introduced, if that's a type, I'm just not aware of what it is. It's too low level for me to know what it is now. I haven't seen it yet. If anyone else has any questions, Maxim here is asking about IIS in proc. Yeah, that's the ANCM in proc stuff. So the hope is, my understanding is that's functional and working, and so that will be in the first preview. It's just that to get it working as part of F5 and VS, it requires VS updates. So that'll be in the first preview of the next VS, which will be very shortly after we release in, towards the end of August or something. So that'll be there as well.
I had one just kind of minor question.
Yeah.
The download page, I was used to, and maybe it's not relevant anymore, but I used to look there also for Docker instructions, Docker stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let me go back and have a look. So that would be, that's interesting. I actually don't. So I guess we don't actually point to the Docker stuff from here.
I mean, there's plenty in the docs, right?
Obviously, most people go to the Docker Hub, right? So like it's all on
right.
our official Docker Hub feed. That's a good point. No, it probably warrants a link, if nothing else. Just a link off to the Docker Hub from here for the images, like both for Framework and Core, and it's true of Windows, Linux, and Mac. And so, yeah, that's good feedback. I'll make sure that. Yeah, there's nothing in there. Yeah, okay. We'll make sure that we get that fixed. That's a fair point. Cool.
I don't see any other questions coming up here, really.
Awesome. Well, I don't know how. Apparently, the audio works fine on the stream now. At least that's what Golnaz is saying. But if people want to just right at the end now say in the chat whether the audio is working for them well or not, because I'd like to make sure that certainly you're quiet in my headphones. I'd like to be able to fix that at least. And then we could, because I turned you down here, but maybe that was the wrong thing. I should have kept you up, and then I could have just turned you down on the stream. And then I could have at least heard you at the right volume. So I think there's a couple of things with the audio that we need to figure out. Oh, there is a question. Is there going to be a setting to switch in VS, to switch between IIS in proc and out of proc for the ANCM module? From Brian. Actually, that setting is in your project. So you do that on a project-to-project basis. So our intent, folks are saying the audio is great for them. Good. So the intent is that new projects, 2.2 projects will default to in proc one way or another, whether it's something that's in the template or whether it's inferred based on the TFM you're targeting, whatever. And you can migrate because the in proc requires a new server in your application, right? So you have to actually be targeting 2.2 to get in proc support. So that's if that's not clear. So you'll need to ensure that you're actually running on 2.2, your app targets 2.2, and then you should get in proc. You can always go back to out of proc if you want to. There's a flag that lets you change the hosting mode, but the default when you're on 2.2 is intended to be in proc. So anyway, short answer is yes, you'll be able to change it, but it's per project rather than in just VS in general. Oh, someone asked about Bootstrap. Sorry, I did mention that and I forgot all about it. Yeah, in 2.2, we're basically moving the templates to Bootstrap. So that was actually in my set of links I was going to show you. So we're taking this opportunity to simplify the template as well. So the application template, the one that has Bootstrap, rather than the template that we have today, which has like, an about page and a contact page and a home page with a carousel and all that stuff on it, we're just going to simplify it all. So we've chosen this template as the basis, as in this sample, which is like white on white with a little shadow, but it won't have any of this content. It basically just says, welcome to your new app. And then rather than this stacked footer down here, it's going to use the traditional sticky footer, which is this one here. All right, so this footer here that always goes to the bottom of the page if there's not enough content to push it down there. Otherwise, it just scrolls underneath everything. It gets pushed to the end of the content. That's what we're doing for our sort of default page. So the reality is it'll be Bootstrap 4. It'll be simpler than it is today. And I think it looks a little cleaner than it does today. It looks a little bit more modern. The template itself isn't where the majority of the work is. Most of the work is actually in updating the scaffolding system and the new identity packages that bring all the UI with them. All the Razor UI inside, so you get your login page and your management page without having to have it all in your app. They all obviously have to be updated to support Bootstrap 4 as well. And so I believe that we're aiming to have at least the template and the project template and the identity packages updated with Bootstrap 4 support in Preview 1, but the scaffolding support may lag behind and not land until Preview 2. So that's the current plan as of that. A couple of other questions here just to finish up. Hasham's asking, any plan to revise the localization APIs? No, there's no plan to do that right now. It's just not in scope. 2.2 was a smaller release. We focused on a set of things, and localization APIs or changes was not one of them. We basically prioritized based on where we got a bunch of feedback. So yeah, as Andros is pointing out, yes, .NET New still contains Bootstrap 3.7, and that's why we are doing the work now to move to Bootstrap 4. All right, I think that's a show.
Oh, so if just for completeness, there was Hisham just tweeted the thing about the route pattern he was asking about.
Oh, okay.
Here, let me see if I can paste it.
Context that will magically make me know what it is?
I don't know. So it's a pull request from Ryan?
I have no idea then.
All right, cool.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not aware. I'd have to ask Ryan what that is. So I think we need to, the plan was to try and get the whole MVC team on to this show, right?
You're right.
So
now I'm out on vacation next week. Otherwise,
it won't be you
perfect.
then. All right. Well, maybe I'll try and run a show early next week, assuming I haven't got a conflict. And I'll see what I can tee up for the next Tuesday. We haven't had a Tuesday morning show in a few weeks, actually. I think Hanselman's back next week. He's at OzCon this week. But we'll see if we can get Hanselman and I on early next week for the other time zone. And we'll see what we can tee up.
Okay.
Cool. Let me see if I can make this zoom out work. You ready?
Dramatic zoom out.
You ready?
The DZO.
Here's the video. I don't think this is going to work. I really have no idea. Oh, I don't know what's behind it. Look. What's this? Oh, that didn't work at all. I resized something else. Oh, no, I've ruined it all. Goldhouse, don't hurt me. Okay. All right, we might just have to give up. I don't know what I just did. I just resized the wrong thing. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. See if this works. Nope, still the wrong thing. No hope. All right. We're going to have to work on the dramatic zoom out. Last week it worked pretty well, but that was on my machine. So we're going to have to figure out how to do it on this machine. So we will just sign off and we'll see folks next week. You know what though? Before we sign off, sorry, I have to show everyone your face because they haven't seen you. Look, hi. Look, there's both of us on the screen. Now they can see both of us. See you, everybody.
But I can't see. I'm just assuming
you're just
my
trusting
face
me.
is there.
It's all good. Trust me, mate. It's fine.